WeatherBrains, episode number 517 for December 7th. It's the NPR version. No, it's not. Hey, this is James, Kev, and Brian, the early birds getting the worm. Kevin, you feeling better? You've been sick for a week or two.
Yes, thank you for asking. I'm much better. Still a little crud in the throat, but feeling much better. Much less grumpy, which probably means not as good a show, but...
I'm glad you weren't sick enough to keep the check from getting to me.
That was probably part of the... Over Thanksgiving weekend, I bet I slept 75% of the 4-day weekend.
Wow.
Yeah. Sometimes your body shuts itself down. I mean, that's the only way to get better. It's just to let itself shut down and reboot.
This one's a tired-making one. I've talked to several people who've had it around here, and they say, yeah, this one's just, some have a bad throat or you have a headache or whatever. This was just a tired-making one. Yeah,
I had a horrible headache. I hadn't had headaches in years. I had a bad one Saturday, and I think it was just fatigue. This is the time of the year where there are constant live shots and parades. It's just, I think I just overdid it. So, but I feel great. I'm rested and ready to go.
Did you have a live shot tonight?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Let's see. This week, I have one tomorrow. Wait, no. Hang on here. No, I have one Wednesday and Friday, according to my calendar here. So it's not as bad as last week. And I've done my one Grand Marshal stint, and I'm going out to the Habitat for Humanity house tomorrow morning. I think you should go up there with me, Brian.
I'm going.
You going tomorrow morning?
Yes, 8 o'clock.
Well, I will join you at 9.
Oh, okay. Are you going to be there too?
Yep.
All right.
Kevin, you ever done a Habitat house?
Yes, in Richmond one time. I would like to go back and do that again.
The main thing, we have to be sure that Brian is not around any power tools.
Oh, really?
It's very dangerous. It's a very and traditionally I come out there. I come out there at weird times just because I'm so busy, and I'll come out there and I'll pick up a board or do something, but I rarely ever get involved because I'm not good at building things, and I just take a lot of pictures and boost the morale of the crew.
Stand around and look beautiful.
And I share the same thing we share on the pre-show here: boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and I occasionally see outrageous things.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is the pre-show for those that are just joining us. The actual show begins in 10 minutes. And what in the world?
What is that?
You're talking about doing live shots. I did one last week. Was it Thursday or Friday? Doesn't matter. They have a thing here called the Gingerbread Jubilee, and it's a fundraiser. And
that doesn't look like gingerbread.
Well, let me finish.
Oh.
You pay your money, and they give you a gingerbread house that is pre-constructed. And this picture is candy that you decorate the house with, okay? But to give you an idea of the volume of candy that was there, this is about a third to maybe a half of one of 9 tables.
I'm getting a sugar high just seeing it.
Exactly, yes. It's a lot of little kids, and it starts at 4, and by 5:30 the kids are bouncing off the walls, having eaten half and then put half on to decorate. It's a wonderful event, but I just wanted to show you the volume of candy. And there was more of each, in the boxes underneath the tables, just in case they ran out.
Wow.
Quite a bit.
Of life.
Great event.
Looks yummy.
Yeah, it was something.
So Bill is out. What is he? Where's he going? Did he say he's flying to?
I don't see why you can't get Wi-Fi on the plane.
Yeah.
Join us from over El Paso or whatever.
Right.
That makes sense.
We got Rick is flying to, or Bill. I heard John's voice and my brain
Steve.
just.
Ed.
Bill is flying to El Paso. Okay. Rick is enjoying the Norman North High School Orchestra concert.
Right.
So,
At
okay.
least Rick is being very noble and family-oriented.
Right. Hey, speaking of family-oriented, for those of you with multiple kids, I have 4. Don't make the mistake of calling your children by another child's name.
Wow.
I'm always called by one of my siblings.
I don't have any siblings, so I'm only called by my name.
Aw.
Yeah, Brian and I are only children.
Oh, we
Really?
should send you some siblings.
No, thank you.
No,
I have
we're,
at least one I'd trade.
Is that what you're asking for Christmas, Brian? A little brother?
No.
I see a title, right? All I want for
boy,
Christmas.
show title already.
Yep. I guess this is a good time, since you're mentioning children, this is a good time to mention I won't be here next week because I'll be in Chicago.
Visiting
Well, I'll
your
throw
child?
this. So the same thing to you. Do they have Wi-Fi there and internet connectivity?
Well, yes, but I have very little time with my daughter because it's a very fast trip. We're going up on Monday and back on Thursday.
What are you driving?
No, I'm flying. we want to see the new play that she's stage managing called Baritones Unbound.
Okay.
What's that rated, Brian?
It's not
G
rated.
for great. It's a singing show, James. It's a singing show.
Okay.
I just put my pick in the chat there, Brian,
Oh, thank you.
so you're not forced to ask.
I want to say how nice it is to get Aubrey and John's picks before the show even started.
I
was
get
so
it.
nice.
I get it.
No, I'm just paying them a compliment. I'm
No,
not.
you're not. You're
You're insulting Kevin. You were
No, I'm
hurting
not.
his
and
feelings.
I showed up early tonight too, and what
I know. See what you miss when you don't show up early?
So let's see if I
I
can bring our
insulted
guest in here. Boy, if we get the guest in here at like 25 after the hour,
Man.
this could be an all-time record. We're missing Nate. Has not been on here in a few. Is Nate? Who made Nate mad?
He's flying all over the country doing his what do they call it? His solo, his cross country.
Solo thing. Yeah.
He might fly up to you, Aubrey, next.
All right, we'll take him. Show him around the valley.
I guess I failed on the Christmas T-shirt thing, didn't I, Aubrey?
I don't know what happened to you, Kevin. You've changed.
I just could. I had a couple of marginal ideas, but I just never got inspired.
I liked the last one you came up with.
Well, we can ramp that up. We can open that up again.
Yeah, well, the new idea, the one that we talked about a few weeks ago.
I've just never
Na,
got
na, na.
excited about one.
You're
I love
listening to
logos.
T-shirt brains, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen.
T-shirt for
Matthew wears his all the time, and I just it looks so good on a T-shirt.
I wear mine all the time.
Wasn't that a show title?
I wear mine all the time.
I wear mine all the time.
No.
I think it was a good position of the blobs.
Yeah, that was something like that was a show title one time. Good position of the blobs. Oh Lord.
All right, so I've invited Jim, our one guest, and there's a chance we could get everybody in here, get this thing on time. This is good stuff.
I doubt it.
No, it's probably
That
never
would
gonna
be like setting a new record, wouldn't it?
well, the thing is, we can't start until they go on the air on the TV side, and again, they didn't go on at all last week. If it's like 5 or 6 after showtime and they're not up, I know there's a problem back there, and I just carry on. So, but I do
rioting in the
believe,
streets that we weren't on TV.
yeah, we had death threats by phone here. No, we're on the on the .2s, and it's on cable, and I think we have more people watching that show. Who's banging here?
It might be me.
Oh, hey, Jim, can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Thanks.
It could be
we
my
apologize. Okay, we need to get you a new chair. We'll get Kevin
really?
on that. He's our chair officer.
No, Jim, that's the usual welcome to guests, is we yell at them for making too much.
Yeah, really, that's great.
Yeah, really. Who's making that noise? Wow. See, now we are at 26 after. We could actually start this show right now, but Jim, we can't. We are on local television here, so we have to wait until 30 after the hour. before the TV joins us. So,
besides that, we never get started on time anyway.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
I know where Jim's cup is from.
Oh, it's a Mass General Store, and on the other side, it says the mountains are calling, and I must go.
Which one is that one from?
We just picked that up.
Because I was at
I
was at one of the originals in Western North Carolina this summer.
Oh, really? Well, see, we have a home in Western North Carolina.
Whereabouts?
You know where Hendersonville is?
That's where my folks live.
Okay, well, I'm 10 miles due east of Hendersonville.
Yeah, they live in a neighborhood called Carriage Park.
I'm not familiar with it, but no, I'm not.
It's on Long John Mountain, just a little bit west of downtown.
Okay.
They look down on Asheville and the regional airport from where they are.
Oh, okay.
I thought that cup Jim has there said Ed's funeral home when I first looked at that thing. Wow. This program brought to you by you stab 'em, we slab 'em.
That little Hendersonville is a
terrible.
lovely little downtown, though, isn't it?
Oh, it's great. There's a lot to do and a lot to see in Hendersonville.
What's the elevation out there?
Ooh.
I'm not sure of Hendersonville. I'm thinking Hendersonville's around 2,000, but I'm on the other side of the mountains, and we're lower. We're about 1,100 feet.
Wow.
Hendersonville, North Carolina, 2,200 feet is Hendersonville.
There you go.
Wow.
They're twice our elevation.
So, Kevin, do you have any more relatives in Boston, Massachusetts, anywhere up there?
Yes, my sister lives there.
Okay, cool.
Why?
I just wondered.
Well, what made you pick Boston?
This is a nosy personal question. Aren't your people all from New England up there somewhere?
Oh, well, no, we've lived here and there, but they lived there for a while. My sister left, and then my parents left, and then she went back.
Okay. All right, 29 after the hour. Anybody need to say anything outrageous before we start?
How you liking the conversation on this show so far, Jim?
Yeah.
I have relatives up in New Hampshire. Does that count?
That is part of New England. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
That's where I was born.
Shocking.
Down in the shadow of Mount Washington, right, Brian?
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's fantastic. What's that little town? Conway?
That's a little town, yes.
Which is the
Conway.
one kind of down below the mountain there?
Conway, isn't it?
Conway. That's one of the ones, yeah.
That's a nice little town.
Yes, it's very nice.
So,
Those are my clocks.
for those that don't know, we're on the I'm on the Jabroni network, but I'm actually using an Ethernet cable for the first time ever. We've had some dropouts, and we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live on the television side. Welcome to the WeatherBrains pre-show.
Mark your calendars. This date is going to live in infamy. Oh,
well,
wait a minute. It already does.
Wait a minute. It already does live in infamy, man.
Well, it's going to live in infamy twice because we're starting on time. Hey, go!
They had us up there for a second, and they just took us down. That was strange.
They didn't like the
They
content
saw
of the
us
show
and said,
already.
that's it.
Yeah, they saw it and said, no, we're not putting this on television. They probably had this fear. I'm trying to see if anybody looks like Chuck Doswell on this show here. Now we are. There we go. No, Chuck can use some salty language from time to time, and it was a little unfiltered for our shows out in Oklahoma. But welcome to the television side. This is WeatherBrains, the pre-show, and we're about to start but let's just start the show now. We're on television. We are ready to go, so let me get the recorders going, and we're going to get this sucker started almost on time.
Can you see the bear?
Can
you see the bear?
Oh, my goodness.
What are you doing, bear? What are you doing?
Wow. Now that's looks like a lazy, rotten, pampered dog.
Show title.
Yeah. All right, we're recording. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, 'tis the season. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 516 for the 7th of December, 2015. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And let me upfront apologize. Can I do that? I'm going to make an upfront apology. For those that listen to the show, we had an audio snafu on last week's show on my track, and we caught it a little too late. We posted the clean audio, but most people, they use these podcast programs. They just download them at the first time they notice there's a new file, and I basically sounded like I was in a urinal in O'Hare International Airport or something.
Show title.
It was the strangest thing. Like, my audio was going from one channel to the other, and it would get low and high. It was just bizarre. It was only on my track, thank goodness. Everybody else sounded fine, but we are still head-scratching over that issue. But anyway, we are here. This is the weekly show about weather. It's December. We are now into meteorological winter. My favorite time of the year. Brian Peters is the internationally beloved meteorologist, former government employee. Worked for the National Weather Service for 82 years. Brian, how are you?
Speaking of audio.
Brian, we couldn't hear a word you were saying. Try it again.
Did I go to mute? I didn't go to mute. I didn't go to mute.
It's kind of coming and going. It's like normally Brian gets this weird buzz stuff, and he unplugs and it comes back. That time it just went to nothing. So
okay, how are we now?
But you know what I got to do now? Since we've got this problem.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
That's my theme song.
So, Brian, weren't you like a grand marshal in a Christmas parade this weekend?
No, you were the grand marshal.
I thought
you were the grand marshal.
Well, they said it on television. Helena's having their annual Christmas parade, and our own Brian Peters is the grand marshal.
No, I was the MC. It's my 7th year to be the MC.
Okay. I did a parade last week, and I've been barred from throwing candy. A lot of people probably heard this boring personal story, but about 10 years ago, I was throwing candy. And I would imagine everybody on the show here has done this. You've been in a Christmas parade, and they give you all this candy to throw. And believe it or not, I used to have a good arm. I mean, I used to have a pretty good little arm and had a Tootsie Pop. And I took that arm all the way back, and I let that thing fly. Man, I was throwing an 86-mile-an-hour fastball, and it cracked the window of a business. So after that, I have been barred from throwing any candy unless it's gummy bears or gummy worms. So you're saying, Brian, you were not, sitting up in the car. Like, it's pretty cool when you do that. Like, they put you in a really nice, convertible. I was in this really cool, yellow convertible, and you're at the lead of the parade, and you're waving at everybody, and but you were like the master of ceremonies, so you were
at the reviewing stand,
fixed location.
Yes, and we had a great parade, longest one we've ever had, and the weather was superb.
Yeah, we've got the eastern half of the nation is pretty pretty warm. Tootsie Pop fastball show title. That's awesome. Aubrey Urbanovic, I bet you Aubrey's got a big arm. I mean, she looks like she could be the greatest girls softball player in America.
I used to play tennis. I didn't really play softball.
But you look like you're an athlete. You just look athletic. You look like you're in shape and you could run 5 miles and you're fast and all that kind of good stuff. So tennis, okay. Well, that'll work.
I can run. We do a little, baseball throwing around here.
Aubrey is WHSV in Harrisonburg, Virginia. So how's life?
It's great. Mom and Dad left yesterday.
Another
show title.
No, it's good. Just a little extension on their trip. But no, it's good. We're getting stuff done around the house. Had a festival. We were at a festival over the weekend and getting ready. We've got our tree up. And Bear's excited about Christmas.
I think he looks pooped. My burning question, Aubrey, is: did they find a place?
They're still looking. They're probably still about a year or two away, but they really, really like Lexington. Mom was quite impressed, and they saw a couple other areas, and it just didn't live up to what they expected. So I could see them in Lexington, which is a beautiful, beautiful. It kind of looks very New England Revolutionary, but it's more of a Civil War town. But it's a beautiful showcase of Virginia.
All right.
And we're ready for the heat for the weekend.
I know it.
Man, I can't wait. I've got everything planned outside that I want to do.
Yeah, sure looks like the East is going to be in a blast furnace kind of thing here for the next, probably for the rest of December. Looking at the CFS data, looks pretty warm, mild, warm, whatever you want to call it. So, works for me. We've had some cold, nasty winters the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, bad, with ice and horrible winter weather events, and I think we could use a break. I have concern about the spring tornado season, but we'll worry about that when it gets here. Kevin Selly, you look like you are worried, sir, about nothing.
I'm just enjoying the heat here. Speaking of warm, our average high this time of year is 56. We did 69 today, and I have 75 on the forecast for Friday.
Wow.
And for those that are not watching, Kevin is in a tank top and flip-flops on the show here. Looking good in that wife beater shirt there, buddy.
We've had quite a range of extremes. It's warm, but then you remember back in May we finished a 5-year drought with 17 inches of rain in May that filled up all the reservoirs that were below 20% here in this area, and the rain that we had, I think over the weekend, the Thanksgiving weekend, we had, I want to say 4.22, and that, for the first time in anyone's memory, put the lakes, the reservoirs, over their spillways for the second time in 1 year.
Ooh,
wow.
Yeah, nice. Since you moved there, things got interesting. I mean, it was just boring. The last big weather event in Wichita Falls probably was that 1979 tornado.
Yes.
And nothing happened, and then Kevin moved there.
I'm absolutely taking and being given credit for ending the drought, and I'm taking full advantage of it.
Great. Hey, look who's back. Nate Johnson has stopped flying for a day, and he actually is back on the show.
With both feet on the ground.
Yeah. That's right.
Boots on the ground.
Nice to be back. It's been a wild couple of weeks. A little travel, a little holiday, a little family in town, a little under the weather, but it's nice to be back.
Flying.
You're working a spatial hair thing now. Is this a new look for you?
This is working. I've had this for a decade. Where have
you
been?
It looks different.
More manly, perhaps.
Yeah, very manly. You're a manly man.
I think it's grayer.
Yeah. Well, there's that too.
There's something different about that, but we'll talk about facial hair on the show next week.
The thought of coming back on the program just made it go gray.
Yeah, Dr. John Scala is up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It looks like you might have a green Christmas, huh?
Oh man, we went through the third warmest and third driest November, and we're starting off right where we ended here in December. And you're right, this weekend, of course, I'm working this weekend, and it'll be the best weekend of December. Watch how this is going to work out. But I'm already thinking 60 this weekend here, which is going to be about 15 degrees above average.
Wow.
Goodness. Yeah, we're expecting low 70s where we are down here in the deep south Friday and Saturday, and a little concern about strong storms late this weekend. But we'll talk about that in the weather roundup. But Dr. John, bring in our esteemed guest, please.
Oh, absolutely. I've got Bill's job this evening, which I don't mind. And we welcome in Jim Gandy. He's our WeatherBrain guest this evening. And the suggestion of bringing Jim on was from a loyal listener, George Chisenhall. So we thank George for this suggestion. Jim has been a meteorologist for over 40 years, including the last 31 on television in Colombia. And Jim, you're on vacation this week, so we really appreciate the fact that you're taking time to come in and spend some time with us. Welcome to WeatherBrains.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
I've got a list of questions, Jim, I'm going to start off with. But at any time,
go for it.
The rest of our brains can jump in, and I've actually got other questions I want to ask as well. But Bill wrote this. I'm not gonna say this, but talk about how you got interested in meteorology, and in fact, take us through your career. How did you end up where you are?
Wow.
We got plenty of time.
Yeah, we got 6 hours. You just talk all night.
Well, I was born in Memphis, and I grew up in the Memphis area. And my earliest recollection of weather was my dad had come across the street. He said, "We're going home." And there was this massive thunderstorm just on the other side of the house. And as we crossed the street, the sky just lit up with lightning. And that is my earliest memory of weather, and it scared the bejesus out of me. And
Show title.
there you go. And from that point on, first of all, I was scared to death of lightning. But I was also kind of fascinated by it. We got transferred, my dad got transferred to Jacksonville, Florida. And it was the first time, this is when I was going into 4th grade, it was the first time that I'd ever flown. This was back in 1960, so you can imagine what the airplanes were like back then. And this was a propeller job, and we flew from Memphis to Jacksonville in the middle of the summer. And what do you think happens in Florida in the middle of the summertime? Thunderstorms. And I was so fascinated flying around those thunderstorms, because back then we couldn't go over them, we had to go around them.
You still shouldn't try and go over them unless you've got a really big, fast plane. Around is
that's true.
A better option.
Well, so that move got me interested in weather, and it just so happens that I got to Jacksonville. I'm in 4th grade. 4th grade is where you study weather, and there was a meteorologist on TV, and he turned out to essentially be my mentor. His name is George Winterling. He's long since retired.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, George was fantastic on television,
Yes.
and I learned so much from him. But I never intended to go into television. After I graduated from Florida State in 1974, I had actually intended to go into the National Weather Service. But the National Weather Service had a hiring freeze. Well, I couldn't just sit around and wait for the freeze to end. I had to get a job. So I actually started at Memphis State University with the idea in graduate school of going into teaching and teaching science. And while I was doing that, the CBS affiliate in Memphis called me and asked me if I wanted to try out for the weekend position. I said, sure. So I went down, I auditioned, and the next week they offered me the full-time job.
Listen, kids, you too can have your first job in Memphis, Tennessee.
Exactly.
Just go back in time 40 years, and it's yours.
Well, that was back at a time. Now, get this. This is back at a time where you didn't have a videotape. In fact, the only videotape that existed back then were the big 2-inch jobs that stations had huge machines to run on. So there was no 3/4 inch, there was no beta, there was nothing like that. And in fact, when I started in television, the only map I had was a map that had magnetic symbols, and that was it. And yeah, back in the simpler days. And I was there for 2 years, and then I got a job at the NBC affiliate in Oklahoma City. And my boss there was Jim Williams. And from there, I was there for about 5 years, and from there I went to Wichita and worked with Mike Smith for 2
That's
years.
Kevin's buddy. Oh, Kevin's not here.
and so and then after that, I went to Columbia, and I've been in Columbia for 31 years.
Yeah, now Kevin's back. Kevin, Jim was sharing that he worked with your friend Mike Smith.
Oh my goodness! Hi, how are you?
That was back when Mike was young, and he's mellowed since then.
Kevin's head's going to explode, I can tell.
I got a show in 15 minutes. See you later.
That could also be a show title, by the way.
All of these comments could be show titles.
Oh, yes.
Oddly enough, Jim, I didn't start out in television either. That was not a perspective for my career that I was pursuing. I got a PhD so that I could teach at a university and do research. It's funny how things change along the way. What kind of... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you got the floor, man. It's all yours.
Well, yeah, it worked out that way. I had success. Here I went to Memphis. I got this call to come down for an audition. I'd never been to a TV station before. So the only thing I could do was think back, what would George do? And so this is George Winterling. So I went into the station, and they didn't have much. They certainly didn't have any weather equipment. They had a teletype machine. So I went over to the National Weather Service. I copied some maps. I went there. I put together the weather show that I would do, and bingo, I was successful.
That's great.
You can't do that today. I mean, and of course you can't see the work I did early on. If I saw a tape of me today, I wouldn't hire me.
I feel the same way about myself.
I mean, it was that bad. And but fortunately, I learned, I improved, and I hope I'm still improving.
I had the same experience at the Weather Channel. They needed someone to do live coverage of an outbreak in the South back in 1999, and they asked me if I wanted to do it with no television experience. And I looked at that. I have that tape, and it's unbelievable how bad it is.
Fortunately for me, everybody was patient. I was also very fortunate. Every place I went, there was a guy who I could depend on. He was kind of like a mentor. In Memphis, the guy, gosh, I can't even remember his name right now, but
Dave Brown?
Well, Dave was there. In fact, Dave had only been on the air a few years when I went on the air.
Wow.
Dave is 67. I'm 63. And Dave just retired, by the way. And he and I have been good friends, since that time. It's always fun to go back. It's going to be different to go back to Memphis, and he's not on the air anymore. But every station I went to, there was always somebody that I could watch and say, he's doing it the right way. I need to emulate him.
Right. We've talked a lot on this program about the next generation of broadcast meteorologists. You have seen a lot in your career. What recommendations, what insight would you provide to students coming out of school right now that want to pursue this as a career?
The biggest concern I have are those who go and get their degree in just broadcast meteorology. As I learned when I came out of college, what you want to do may not be available. You need to be flexible to be able to go and do something else. When I first got out of college, in fact, I actually worked at the Institute for Storm Research in Houston, Texas, and then went to Memphis and started doing other things. But you've got, when you're in school, you've got to prepare for almost anything. And I think that for those who are simply going to get their degree in broadcast meteorology, what happens if they're not successful in television? You can't always tell who's going to be successful and who isn't. And if they aren't successful in television, then what are they going to do?
And I would add, Jim, if I can, could you tell people now, because people ask me, I mean, if you come out of school, you realistically are looking at a 45-year period that you are asking the local broadcast news television model to support you. Do you think that that is realistic?
It may not be today.
Yeah.
We're seeing so many changes taking place in broadcasting. I mean, it's totally different from when I started. I started in television in November of 1975. Well, it was a totally different animal back then. Back then, it was dominated by 3 networks. Fox hadn't even come along yet. Cable didn't have the penetration. And now, the young people, not only are they not reading newspapers, they're not watching newscasts. So you have to start trying to reach them through social media. And if you look at the advertisements now for meteorologists on TV, They want you to do the TV. They want you to be web savvy, social media savvy. I mean, you're a broadcaster in every sense of the word, but you've got so many different platforms that you've got to work on that it's nothing like what I used to do.
And in some cases, Jim, there are stations, excuse me, including one of the stations in Charlotte, just up the road from you, that hired a digital social media meteorologist whose sort of second gig is filling in on TV, but her primary job is feeding all of the social platforms, their blog, their website, that sort of thing. And I think that just speaks to that, and I would expect that kind of position to proliferate in the coming years as stations really start to realize the value of what they've got on digital and mobile.
And that's on top of the fact that our science is getting better, but it's also getting more technical. And if you don't know how to use the products, then you run the risk of misinforming your audience.
Jim, our
I see a
students
lot of that.
graduating today, are they prepared for the arena in which they are entering? Are they prepared both from a curriculum perspective, but also a skill set perspective?
Not in television, they're not, because there's nothing, there's not a program that I'm aware of that prepares them for the reality of television. They'll learn that when they get into the business, but they're going to have to be fast learners.
A lot of OJT then.
Now, what I usually tell people is, first of all, if you're really interested in meteorology, go get a degree in meteorology. And then if you want to do television, that's great. But keep in mind, that's not the only thing that you can do with a degree in meteorology. In fact, there are a lot of things you can do with a degree in meteorology. And, I get this question a lot from people that want to be meteorologists, but they're still like in junior high or something like that. What should I take in high school? Whoa!
Hello.
I think I just knocked. Did I just knock myself off?
No, you're still back. You're back.
Okay, we're getting back there. Okay, hold on. What do I do now?
We've never had anybody knock their camera off on the show before. That was exciting.
Well, I talk with my hands. What can I say? Okay, now what?
Now we're getting a good look at your chin.
There we go. Yeah, we'll get that fixed. Anyway, because I'm used to talking with my hands. That's why you see this flying all over the place. For kids in junior high, they'll ask, well, what should I take? Well, my suggestion is, well, everything's important. Don't worry about specializing. You'll do that later. You need English. You need to be able to communicate. You need mathematics. You need to be able to figure. You need science. You need it all. Look, I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist. But here was my senior year in high school. I started the day with humanities. Then, let's see, first period was sociology and psychology. Then it was English. No. Second period was German. Third period was English Lit. Fourth period was French. And I was a lab assistant.
How do you remember this? I can't remember that.
I can't even remember it.
I remember it because it was so unusual. Because all of my friends, they were taking calculus, they were taking advanced physics, and all that. Not me. I said, I want to be a scientist, but I want to know what it's like not to be one for a year. So I took the year off. Now, the benefit, the disadvantage to that was when I got to Florida State, I couldn't exempt anything. I exempted no course. My first quarter at Florida State, I took 3 math courses in an attempt to catch up. But because of all those courses, I had 12 term papers to write my senior year. So when I got to college, I could write.
Yeah. Who were your instructors at Florida State?
Oh my gosh. Dr. Seymour Hess. Do you remember him?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Seymour Hess, Dr. Richard Craig, Dr. Noel Lesueur.
Yes, he was my advisor.
And there was, oh gosh, it's so long ago, I can't remember. Oh God, what was his name? Dr. Jordan was there. My advisor was Dr. Stevens. James
J.J.
Dale.
Stevens.
Yeah. J.J. Stevens. Dr. O'Brien was there. Krishnamurti was there. Still is. Those.
Jim, let me interrupt for a second. For those that are listening, these are some of the who's who in our discipline, historically speaking. These are huge names you're talking about.
Well, and not only that, I had the opportunity, because we had this visiting professor from Rutgers come down about once a year to teach climatology. His name was Herbert Beale.
Yes.
He was
great.
He was. And
he was fabulous.
I really enjoyed his courses and visiting with him. So I had a really good time at Florida State, and some of the people that I went to school with, have gone on to bigger and better things, and I've been able to stay in touch with some of them.
Wow. Let me throw a couple names by you, Jim, and then we'll move on to some other questions here. My advisor when I worked on my PhD was Mike Garstang.
Yeah, he was there, but I never met him.
He was in fluid dynamics.
Yeah.
Which was actually separate from meteorology.
Okay.
Dr. Staley was there. He was in the oceanography department.
Right. Yep.
I read some of his papers as a grad student.
And of course, Dr. Pfeffer was over at geophysical fluid dynamics.
Yeah.
And when I went to NASA and did my postdoc, I worked under Joanne Simpson.
Oh yeah. I never met her. Florida State has a pretty good connection with the National Hurricane Center in Miami.
Oh, sure.
So occasionally we would have people coming through from Miami.
Okay.
I mean, I'm so old. I remember, I remember getting geostationary weather satellites by mail.
Pony Express.
It was pretty much that way.
Well, Jim, since you opened the door, let's talk about some of the historical events that you've covered. And there's several in there that I'm thinking of.
Well, the first one that I can remember, and Kevin, well, in fact, James, you mentioned this. It was the tornado that hit Wichita Falls, Texas in 1979. I was in Oklahoma at the NBC affiliate at that time and remember vividly everything that went on with that particular tornado. And I was stunned by how few people were killed by that massive tornado. While I was in Oklahoma City, we had several tornado outbreaks. You can't be in Oklahoma and not experience it. I remember when I first got the job in Oklahoma, I told my folks, I said, well, I've accepted a job in Oklahoma City. And I said, we're going to find out what kind of a meteorologist I am, because there are only two kinds of meteorologists that survive in Oklahoma City: those who can and those who can't. Those who can't get out, and they get out fast. And Oklahoma City is littered with stories in the past of meteorologists that didn't even last, 3 months because they just couldn't hack it. Fortunately, I lasted 5 years. and then I had a great time in Oklahoma City. I was very fortunate in that some of the people that I went to school with were working down at the National Severe Storms Laboratory in Norman, Oklahoma. Peter Ray, Fred Carr, and there's other people that I knew from Florida State. And then I went to Wichita to work with Mike Smith. Mike had a company there, Weather Data, and for 2 years I worked there. I was director of operations, and that was a fascinating time. I learned a lot. I've learned a lot everywhere I went, so that wasn't a problem. But I was working so much in Oklahoma City. I mean, in Wichita. I said, if I want to live to retire, I got to find a slower-paced job. And so I had been contacted 2 years prior by the NBC affiliate in Columbia, but I turned them down. And so they came calling again. And this time I accepted. And so I moved to Columbia. And the first thing I remember vividly, after being in the Plain States for 7 years, oh my God, trees!
Yeah. Trees.
They exist! And so, and it didn't take long. I mean, no one in Columbia knew who I was, but it didn't take long on the NBC affiliate to get a reputation. And I remember, in Oklahoma City and in Wichita, my focus was on studying and being prepared for severe local storms. Well, we get that in Columbia, but we also get hurricanes.
Yeah.
And I hadn't dealt with hurricanes in years. And so I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do if a hurricane? Because I didn't have all the equipment that I needed to do that. And sure enough, I got tested right away.
Yeah.
That September, there was a hurricane.
89,
It came. It was 1984.
4.
1984.
Okay.
This is 1984. It came right. I can't remember the name of the storm, but I think it was Diane or something like that.
Yeah.
It came right up to the coast and it stalled. And I remember on the 11 o'clock show saying, "Look, the hurricane has stalled." And I'll tell you an old forecast rule. And this is a really old forecast rule. When a hurricane stalls, it's getting ready to change direction. And I never forgot that, and it helped me several times. But in this particular case, I said, I don't know which way it's going to go, but I'm going to be here, and if it starts to head our way, we'll be on the air. And at midnight, all of a sudden on the radar, I'm starting to notice this westward drift. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I call my news director. Now, he's sound asleep. And I called him and I said, I think you better get some crews in here because the storm is headed for Myrtle Beach. Now, that's a pretty tough call when it's just south of Wilmington, North Carolina. But it was creeping that way, and I couldn't see anything that was going to change it. So the crews got to the station at 4 o'clock. They were on the road, and they made it to Myrtle Beach as the hurricane made landfall.
Wow.
And now this is before we had satellite trucks and so forth. They got the footage. We had crews on their way back in time for the noon show when everybody else was just going to the beach. So that was my first success with hurricanes.
Hey, tell us about Hugo.
Yeah.
That's an interesting story. Hugo, of course, formed. It was one of these Cape Verde storms, and it was moving across the Atlantic, and it hit Puerto Rico. And that part of the forecast was fine. But at that time, I was making a 5-day forecast. So from Puerto Rico, a hurricane can easily make it to South Carolina in 5 days. So I got to make a 5-day forecast. What am I going to do? So I started looking at the computer models, and so as the storm was, I looked at the models, and keep in mind the models weren't as good as they are today. And the models kept wanting to turn the storm westward. and had, in fact, as it was coming off of Puerto Rico, it was moving north-northwest, and the models kept wanting it to turn it westward and head to Miami. And the National Hurricane Center forecast reflected that. And I'm looking and I'm scratching my head, and I'm thinking, but what's going to turn it? I mean, there's got to be some reason for a storm to turn. And there was nothing apparent. I couldn't see anything, so I decided, okay, forget the computers. So I started looking at just taking the computer forecast 500 millibar flow every 12 hours and just extrapolating the potential for the storm. And when I did that, it took it right into South Carolina. Now, I don't know why the computer models kept wanting to turn it, but every forecast run was a little bit further north. First, they had it going to Miami, then Fort Lauderdale, then further up the coast, then Melbourne, and it kept creeping up the coast, And that was a Monday. When I came back on Tuesday, I fully expected that I was going to have to change my forecast. But to my surprise, my 24-hour forecast was within 50 miles of the actual location.
Wow.
And I said, okay, I'm on to something. So, but the computer models continued this bias of turning it to the west, but it wasn't turning west. And Wednesday comes around, and what are you going to do? Now it's out there. It's got 105-mile-an-hour winds, and it's going to make landfall probably around Friday. And I started looking, and I was listening to the Weather Channel, and John Hope said something that resonated with me. He said, look at the satellite picture, and look how the flow is converging. And I said, that's it. That's it. So on Wednesday, I went on the air and I said, the storm is going to hit South Carolina. It is going to accelerate its forward speed, and it's going to intensify before it reaches the coast. Now, that's a lot. That's a stretch. Back then, that was a stretch. And because the National Hurricane Center was saying no significant increase in strength expected. But you had this Gulf Stream out there. It was going to go perpendicular to the Gulf Stream, and it was going to be accelerating. That's the recipe for an intensifying storm. So that's what I said. And on that Thursday, now the governor was watching. And being in Columbia, they watch. And the governor was looking at it, and the state climatologist turned to him, it was John Purvis, and he said, he might be right. So on Wednesday, the governor, who was Carol Campbell, went ahead and did voluntary evacuation of the coast. And Thursday morning, I went into the Weather Center early because, the National Hurricane Center posts their forecast at 11 o'clock. So I was there when their National Hurricane Center forecast came in, and their 11 o'clock advisory had the storm moving in Charleston. And I said, this is it. This is it. So I got everybody together, and their forecast, now this was the National Hurricane Service Weather Service forecast, had winds of 100 miles an hour, gusts to 100 miles an hour in Columbia. Now, that's never happened as far as we know. And so I went on the air at noon, and the mayor of Columbia is there. He's on the set with me. I say, well, the storm is going to make landfall probably during the early morning hours of Friday. It's going to be intensifying. It's probably going to make landfall with sustained 135, and it's going to come up right through the middle part of the state. And we just went on and on and on. Well, the local office of the National Weather Service called me after that and said, that's not what we're forecasting. Mm-hmm. And they tried to convince me that, well, we expected to do what Gracie did back in 1955 or something like that. We expected to fall apart when it makes landfall. I said, I understand what you're saying, But this is a different beast. This is not 1955. This storm is accelerating. It is going to be going across a warm Gulf Stream. It's got all the characteristics that you would want for a storm to intensify. And at noon on that Thursday, it still had winds of 105 miles per hour. It really hadn't started to intensify yet. By the next advisory, it was 110. And it kept, every advisory after that kept increasing the winds. But they also kept saying no significant strength was expected, increase in strength. And of course, it made landfall just after midnight in the Charleston area with maximum sustained winds of 135 miles an hour. It came up through the Santee Cooper Lakes. It passed east of Columbia. And in the city, on top of the AT&T building, they recorded a wind gust of 104 miles an hour.
Wow.
So obviously that was a successful forecast, but it was one of two really outstanding forecasts I was able to make that year, and I didn't really consider that one to be my best one. My best forecast, now a lot of people remember Hugo because it was so devastating. But the forecast that I thought was better occurred back in February. We had a situation develop, and I went on the air the night before, and I said, look, I disagree with the forecast. I know what everybody is thinking, and I know this is what you're going to hear. This is what the National Weather Service is going to, this is what they're forecasting. Tomorrow, they're forecasting it's going to be cloudy, there's going to be some rain, and we're going to see high temperatures in the low 50s. Well, when I analyzed all the data, that's not what I came up with. I said, that's their forecast, but I disagree with it. I think tomorrow it's going to start out cloudy. You're going to wake up to some cold air. It's going to be out of the northeast. It's what we call a cold air damming. I think that our high temperature will be 38. And I think that the rain is going to start and it's going to change to snow, and we're going to get snow tomorrow. Now, when you go against the National Weather Service like that, I mean, they've got all these computers, they've got great forecasters, they've got I mean, they have the advantage. And I'm on TV espousing what this was, you know, the way I forecast is I let the data speak. And if the data tells me something different, then, you know, the first thing I do when I forecast is I look at the initial conditions of every computer that I use. I look at the initial conditions because if they're not right, the forecast's not right. So I could see what was happening, and back in 1989, you also have to understand we had this new computer model that I had already studied, and I knew its characteristics. It was called the NGM. Do you remember that?
No good model.
Yeah.
No good model.
No good model. But it did better than the LFM, which was the lousy forecast method.
It was only 6 layers. It had to do better.
But the thing I knew about the NGM was that it had higher resolution in the lower part of the atmosphere, and it could capture the cold air damming better than the other computer models. And what the NGM was telling me was it was going to be cold. And so I went out on a limb that night, and I fully expected the next day to have to come back and say, I blew it. But as I'm driving home at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got hit by this northeast wind. And my first instinct was, damn, I was right. And it hadn't even started doing anything yet. But the cold air damming had arrived, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, oh my God, it is never going to get to the 50s tomorrow. And at 7:30 in the morning, I get my wife was a teacher at the time. I get this call at 7:30 in the morning. and you know, she always got up and went to school. She was always one of the first teachers at school. She calls me and she says, "Look outside, it's snowing." And I looked outside, and there were big flakes of snow coming down. We lived on the northwest side of town, so I knew it hadn't gotten to the city yet. And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna fall back to sleep." 10 minutes later, my morning meteorologist calls me. "We're getting snow here in Columbia," and I said, "Okay, all right, go 2 to 4 inches of snow." Now, at this point, the National Weather Service hasn't said anything about snow. Finally, they put out a statement. Some light snow might mix in with the rain, but no accumulation is anticipated. And sure enough, by noon, we had 4 inches of snow on the ground. And so I considered that to be my best forecast. And here's why. Because I acted on what I believed. And not only that, I put the station in severe weather mode. Because as you know, in this part of the world, when it snows, everything comes to a halt. There are no snow plows. You just wait for the snow to melt.
Yeah.
And so the station had booked 10 rooms in a hotel down the street so they would have staff here for the snowstorm. Well, if the snowstorm doesn't occur, they just wasted all that money putting people up for the night. But as it turned out, it was money well spent.
So you started this story, the story about the snowstorm, by using the phrase, "I let the data speak to me."
Yeah.
And I work with a guy who has said that a lot recently, talking about Greg Fishel and his views on climate change and how he has.
And we're going to suspend we're suspending the buzzer because I want to talk about this too. Go ahead.
So he's, we've talked about this. He's talked about it on this program in the past. But you were part of a pilot project called Climate Matters that, by and large, is the reason why Climate Central exists in its current form. Certainly one of its major outreach operations is doing research, looking at data, and then providing the outcome of that research, good, bad, or ugly, to local broadcast stations all across the country. Tell us a little bit about that pilot project, how you got involved, and what you learned.
Okay, well, it goes back earlier than that. I had, by the time we get into close to the beginning of this century, I've already established my reputation as a meteorologist in Columbia. I was at a retirement party for a friend of mine who was retiring from the Department of Geology at the University of South Carolina. And some of these geology professors were coming up to me and asking me, "Do you think global warming is real?" Well, really, I hadn't given it that much thought. I mean, that my biggest focus was on forecasting the next severe weather event, and that's what I had been doing. So I started doing the research myself, reading the scientific journals, and I started talking to climate scientists, and it kind of evolved over time. But I didn't intend to go in and produce this thing called Climate Matters that eventually I got involved in. I actually got on the station scientist committee of the AMS because I recognized in my neighborhood there was a significant amount of scientific illiteracy, and I wanted to address it. So I got onto the Station Scientist Committee. I started a web page on our station website for science and technology. And I would post stories on that page, and it almost freaked me out how misinformed about science some of the responders were. And it wasn't about climate. I mean, it was a myriad of things that I was talking about in science and technology. And while I was on the Station Scientist Committee, Joe Whitty sent a request to the Station Scientist Committee talking about this pilot project that they wanted to do. And I thought, well, that sounds something I'd like to be involved in. So, and what he was asking for was somebody to be an advisor. And so I had just come inside from working outside, and I quickly dashed off an email to him, hoping that I was the first one to respond. And Joe responded very quickly to me and said, thank you for your interest, but another person on the committee has already responded and asked to be the advisor. It turned out to be Danny Satterfield, a good friend of mine. And so I dashed another email back to Joe, and I said, well, Danny is a fine person. I know he'll do a great job, but if there's anything I can do, just let me know. Well, a few days later, Joe calls back and he says, would you like to be the test case? And I said, I would love to be the test case. And here was my argument. I'm not from a red state. I'm from a dark red state. And if you can talk about climate change in Columbia, South Carolina, you can talk about climate change anywhere. So that was 2009. The project.
Still employed. How about that?
Get this. And you know, actually, I think part of my reputation may be one reason why I didn't get land blasted like you know, a lot of other people that talk about climate change. In fact, it was really interesting. Before I got onto Climate Matters, one night I posted this story about how nitric oxides were attacking the ozone layer. And this guy got on and wrote a comment saying, you know, that's not possible. And, you know, he was totally wrong. He had the science all wrong. And I was thinking about it, and I said, you know, kids are going to look at this and think he's right. And I said, I cannot allow this to go unchallenged. Now, up to that point, I had a rule. I never responded to a comment because it's a black hole. Mm-hmm. And once you go down that path forever, it will rule your destiny. And a little Star Wars reference there. But it must have been a weak moment because I responded to that email. Not only did I respond, I mean, I spent the rest of our broadcast ended at 11:30, and I was on the internet. I was looking at the research, and I wrote. You know, we had a limit as to how long comments could be. It was 2,000 characters, and I wrote 3 pages worth of response. And I didn't leave the station until 4 o'clock in the morning. And the next morning I woke up.
Sounding more and more like Fischel with every comment. He's been known to hang out at the station until 4 in the morning doing God only knows what. So.
And so when I got back, when I got up the next morning, I thought, oh my God, what did I do? You know, maybe I was a bit harsh. So I got up. I got onto our website, and I went to that page, and I looked at the comments, and he had responded. And his response was, but you're my favorite meteorologist. And I just felt bad because I just went off on him. And you know, when it came to Climate Matters, I never really got the negative feedback that a lot of other people. I mean, I got some. It's not like I didn't get any, but even the general manager took a phone call one time, and the guy on the other end said, "You need to fire Jim Gandy." And when he told me that story, I said, "Well, he's right. You need to put me out of my misery." But now I had great support from my management. Number one, the general manager and the news director. When I explained to them what the project was, what we were attempting to do, they were all for it. And so we went for a year. Climate Matters helped produce a lot of the modules that we used that first year. And we did the whole project. It was the results were published in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society in the January 2013, I want to say, issue, and they never let me see the results of the project until we wrote the paper. And the first time I saw a draft of the paper, I was blown away. And here's why. What's one of the arguments? Well, go back to 2010. One of the arguments that everybody was using, well, you don't want to alienate your audience. And to make a long story short, when we did the surveys, we did a pre-survey and a post-survey. And from when we did the pre-survey, we divide the audience or the people into two groups: WLTX viewers and non-WLTX viewers. But in the post-survey, we had to create three groups. We had WLTX viewers, non-WLTX viewers, and new WLTX viewers. And here's why. As it turns out, of the respondents, those who said that they were WLTX viewers in the first survey, 7% said they were non-WLTX viewers in the second survey. But in the non-WLTX viewers, 59% shifted from non-WLTX viewers to the new WLTX viewers. That was a net shift of 52% of the survey. That's huge. Now, that isn't because of Climate Matters. There were other things that go on in the market. But you couldn't use the argument anymore that you will turn people off. And so Climate Matters, it achieved what it needed to for that year. But I never intended to stop with the end of the year. So I continued Climate Matters going. And Climate Central was very good to continue working with me to provide me with the material I needed to do things. There were some interesting things. You can talk about the global warming and all this, but the one piece that we did that got the most reaction from our audience had nothing to do with global warming. It had to do with the changing air chemistry and with the fact that with the increase in carbon dioxide, poison ivy is growing faster. Now, not in everybody's neighborhood is poison ivy a big deal, but in South Carolina, poison ivy is a big deal. And not only was it growing faster, it was getting more toxic. And there was a research project done at Duke University that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2008, which showed what the effect of increasing carbon dioxide would have on the toxicity of carbon dioxide. And it was amazing. It was amazing. And it was kind of interesting. Later on, we discovered records at the Congaree National Park, which is south of Columbia. They have been studying poison ivy since the 1960s. And what the Duke study found was also found in the data from the Congaree National Park. And of course, Climate Matters, I've been doing it now for over 5 years. And it's been an experience. It's been interesting. One of the things that I have found is that the Republican Party in South Carolina is not monolithic. It's split in two. There are those that don't believe it, and there are those who do. So that's progress.
Well, let me just throw this in here, because the reason we have a buzzer on this show, this topic creates hate and anger and rage. And I'm not talking about Joe Q Public. I'm talking about the weather enterprise. Yeah. And I don't like that. There's nothing you're going to say on this show to convince somebody of your point of view. It's not going to happen. And I think this is not the forum for that. But you've introduced politics, and I wrote a piece last week, and my question is there any way that we can communicate without this being politicized? To me, the left wing and the right wing loons have taken over in this country. There's like no middle ground anymore. And what's disturbing to me, I see a lot of people on both sides of this issue, both sides, that have become radicalized into the radical left and right wing. And I've seen climate scientists, meteorologists that are posting horrible things involving politics and having nothing to do with weather on their social media feeds. And I'll be honest with you, I have blocked a lot of people in the last 5 days. And these are a lot of people I've known for 30 and 40 years, but I just don't want to see their political stuff. I have no interest in that. So, Jim, the question is there any way that a John Christie, a Judith Curry, a Marshall Shepard, a Jim Gandy, a James Spann, a John Scala can sit down and talk about this issue without saying the word Republican or Democrat? Because you introduced it by saying the word Republican.
Well, I do that here, but I don't when I'm on the air. When I do Climate Matters, it is strictly the science. What you do with it is up to you. I can talk about the science, but I can't really talk about the solutions because that goes beyond the realm of the science. The science can guide you, but it can't tell you what to do. And if we're going to solve these problems, we're going to have to take a hard look at, well, how do we want to solve these problems? I mean, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people about this, and I'll tell you, and John, you might, you're familiar with some of the things that Stu Ostro has done. Everybody comes to this and has a defining moment. I'm sure Greg Fishel was the same way. There's an aha moment where all of a sudden everything clicks. And I took all the physical meteorology in college. I mean, I studied radiative transfer. I know the greenhouse theory. I know all of that. But the thing that really blew me away was something that Stu Ostro did. And this was back, he must have posted it in 2006, 2007, somewhere in that time frame, in which he took the 500 millibar heights, mean heights around the globe, and he compared it with 30 years before. And when I saw the map that he displayed, it was an aha moment for me because it clearly showed that the thickness, the 500 millibar thickness had increased over 30 years, almost over all the globe. Well, there's only one way it can do that, and that is if the temperature warms. If you know anything about the hypsometric equation, that's a weather geek.
Among friends here.
Well, good, because thickness is directly proportional to the mean temperature of the layer. The only way the thickness can increase is if the temperature increases. And the first time I saw that, I said, oh my God. Maybe there's something to these temperatures, these temperature anomalies that they're doing. So I just started doing more research. And, I long ago came to the conclusion that the globe is warming. And just based on greenhouse theory, if you increase greenhouse gases, the atmosphere has to respond.
But again, I go back to and again, we've got to take 35 after, we've got to take a break, but how can we talk about this without introducing politics into the equation?
Well, I don't.
On the data.
Yeah,
you don't, but trust me, a lot of people do, Jim. I mean, let me tell you what. And again, I'm talking both sides, right wing, left wing, and they suck these professionals in the weather enterprise into this political ideology, and and before you know it, they're not talking about climate, they're not talking about weather, they're talking about gun control, they're talking about Muslims, they're talking about all this stuff that we see on television every night that's tearing this country apart. And somehow we've got to parse this out of this political process, and it's really disturbing to me. And I just, Stu Ostro and Marshall Shepard are the two guys I refer people to. because they don't have any political interest. They don't take any money. And there's a lot of people on both sides that are taking a lot of money. If anybody says they're not, if everybody's, both sides claim the other side is making all the money. There's people making tons of money on both sides. But Marshall and Stu, they don't make any money off this. Right. They're brilliant scientists. They make a lot of sense, and I send people to them. And I love to listen to both sides of this argument. We're going to have Joe Bastardi on this show. And already some hater got on us, and he started this political stuff, and I had to cut him off. I blocked first, ask questions later. It is my hope that we can sit down and talk about this. We are all in the weather enterprise. The litmus test should not be where you stand with climate change and what part of it is man-made and what about natural variability. And I'm afraid we're just hating on each other so much that we're not going to make any progress here. And I'm hoping that, and you seem like a cool head, that somebody like you can come in here and help settle everybody down and everybody take a chill pill here.
Like Mike, I've mellowed with age.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate then. And I'm not a cool head, as you all well know.
Good, go.
Well, let me suggest this. Let's say we stop talking about this in the weather enterprise because it's climate, it's not weather. And one of the primary motivations of the I shouldn't say motivations. One of the primary functions as of the last couple of years of the anthropogenic global warming side is to convince the local television weather people of their argument. We've all seen the survey that comes out every now and then. What's that guy's name? Mason? Who is it, Nate?
George Mason University.
Yeah. You think of George Mason University.
Yeah, right. And so we've all kind of gone down that road the last couple of years, and for those who don't know what that is, we get this survey, and it was done a couple of years ago, and a bunch of people went, well, geez, this is biased toward, anthropogenic global warming, and it seemed as though the message that they gleaned from it was that they weren't doing a good enough job convincing us of their point of view and increased that effort to do so. But I would go back to my statement. It's not a weather issue. I got enough trouble figuring out what's going to do tomorrow and 3 days from now. And I could take the time to not fully, but in greater depth educate myself on this, but I'm certainly never going to be an expert in this area, and it feels a little, nobody's going to change their mind, first of all, but it feels a little disingenuous to say, well, if the local television meteorologist is the station scientist, which a lot of people have come to decide over the last couple of years, that you try and convince them of your argument, because the theory is that we hold some sort of sway over our audience because we have something to do with the weather and not the climate. But it feels phony that they're trying to convince us. And I'm not picking a side either way. I don't think I ever have. But why should we continue? I'll put it back to you, James. Why don't we just stop?
In my position too, and I'll say this before we go to break. On my watch, in this state, 252 people died 4.5 years ago in one day from tornadoes. My passion is fixing the warning process, finding out what went wrong and fixing it, because there have been too many funerals on my watch. I'm like Kevin. I don't have time to get involved in the climate thing. I am busy. I'm the busiest guy on the show. I work from 5 a.m. until midnight, and I got a lot of work to do. And one guy can only do so much. And I like Kevin says, I can't involved in this either. But I wish there's a way we could just have some common sense discussion about this. And the one thing that still chaps me to this day, there was a guy representing the one side of this argument that came on one of these left-wing things, and understand, I am not right-wing or left-wing. I am fed up by all of them. But the left-wing guy said that the people of Alabama deserve to die because they're in a state with all these, right-wing guys and they climate deniers and all this. How dare you come in here and imply that people in my state deserve to die? I mean, this moron should not have a voice to represent anybody in the weather enterprise. And
I think the two things. Number one, I don't think we have to choose our problems to solve. In other words, I think there's enough manpower, there's enough brain power to go around that we can tackle multiple problems simultaneously. This doesn't mean that if your passion is, James, if your passion is fixing the warning problem, then anybody who's heard you speak at AMS or NWA knows how passionate you are about this, and rightfully so, that doesn't mean that we can't also try and address climate change in some way, shape, or form, or at least, try to understand what is happening, whether we're causing it, to what extent we're causing it, etc. Second piece of that, I don't think we advance the conversation by allowing the nut jobs to represent the common sense people. When we give those people a voice, when we give those people an audience and a platform to be hateful, to be disrespectful, to be unscientific, then we do everyone a disservice. And I think what we all have to commit to do is just like you said, let's come around the table. Let's bring the Marshall Shepherds. Let's bring the Greg Fishells and the Jim Gandys and the John Christies and the Judith Currys of the world. Let's bring these people around the table and have a conversation about the science, about the facts. And like Jim said at the very beginning, let's let the data speak to us. And it may be that the data leads different people in different directions, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, we have to stop trying to convince each other and just start trying to meet each other.
Yes,
and that's a whole different challenge.
I guarantee everybody on the show is looking for the truth. I am. I love listening to all sides of this, and I'm looking for the facts. I want them to speak for themselves. And I look at Jim. You seem like the cool-headed guy that we need to be involved in this. You're not involved in politics, are you? I mean, anyway.
No. And in South Carolina, I work with everybody: Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, and I'd even work with liberals if there were any. But in South Carolina, they're kind of few and far between.
Yeah, and again, that's the same way I am. The thought of politics makes me sick.
The thing about it is, I'm not going to advise them on what they should do politically, but I'll be glad to give them my opinion as to what I think is going on, whether it's a hurricane approaching the coast, or if I think that the Earth is warming, and what impact to my audience. And I explained this a lot when I was working with George Mason University and Climate Central. I said, global warming, that is something that a lot of people can't get their head around because it's global. They're only familiar with local. And so what we need to do is we need to address, and that's what I try to do, is how is this affecting us? And I've actually taken it a step further. Now, I'm still doing Climate Matters, and I have been for over 5 years, but I started something last year called Gandy's Garden. Now, I'm not an expert gardener, but we're all familiar with the drought in California. As it turns out, the drought in California was having a big impact in South Carolina. We have a sizable poor population in South Carolina, and they live from paycheck to paycheck. And when vegetables started going up in price, it was, the grocery dollar was just going through the roof. I said, we need to address this. So I got together with my station management. I said, let's show them how they can impact their own situation. They don't have to pay high prices for good quality food. Growing a garden, it can't be rocket science, or we wouldn't have any food. So we started Gandy's Garden, and it's been a learning experience, because as a gardener, I have to look at the climate. I have to look at things. I have to look at weather. And wouldn't you know it, ever since we started this, there have been all kinds of weather impacts. And it's made me appreciate farmers even more, because what's happening to me on a small scale is happening to them on a huge scale. And in South Carolina, the farmers this year have just taken a beating. We recently just had this tremendous flood, and there are going to be a lot of farmers that are going to be going bankrupt this year because of it. Because they were struggling even before the flood. And they were struggling because our climate in South Carolina has changed to a point that it's actually beginning to affect some of the produce. This year was a difficult year in South Carolina for tomatoes. And the reason is because the low temperature was the third highest on record. And every time we have these very warm summers with warm summer nights, tomatoes don't like that. And in fact, the 3 hottest summers on record in the Columbia area have occurred in the last 6 years. And here's something, now this is the data. Here's something that's really amazing. It hasn't been the high temperature. Those 3 summers were the hottest on record because of the low temperature.
Which brings into mind, one of these days we need to do a show on the urban heat island. But you're right. I mean, that is data that we all need to look at. But we are 12 minutes late and taking a break here. So let's take a quick break.
Wait. I have a question. I have a question for Jim first.
Okay.
All the times that you were talking, I noticed that Jim knocked his camera on the floor again, and I wanted to know if the camera people at your station are unusually bruised or damaged or higher turnover. I'm just asking.
They stand back a long way.
That's kind of what I figured.
All right. Hey, let's roll Professor Peters, Tony Rice, and the Astronomy Report. We can have the Fog Bank, email, picks of the week, weather roundup, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
They bill themselves as a smarter way to view the weather. While I'm not sure I agree completely with that statement, they certainly qualify as a different way to view the weather. Search Bloom Sky from your browser and you should get to their webpage right away. While the majority of weather stations provide measurements of the weather, the Bloom Sky approach is visual with an outdoor station that provides an image of the sky at your location updated every 5 minutes along with the present temperature. The station includes an alien-looking unit that houses the fisheye camera as well as weather sensors, which include temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, UV exposure, and precipitation. This unit comes with a ground stake on which it and the solar panel are mounted. My package also included an inside unit which displays the current temperature inside and outside, as well as the relative humidity in both locations. I understand that this unit has been discontinued. Primary access to the weather data is via an app, which is available for free from iTunes. The app is apparently only available right now for the iPhone. When the unit arrives, it is packaged very well, with each element in its own box wrapped in a band of paper clearly labeling the contents. Once you have everything unpacked and the app up and running on your iPhone or iPad, you're ready to begin the setup of your device. The app starts with the setup of the observational unit to pair it with your Wi-Fi network. Lights on the observational unit provide you information as to the status of the setup and successful conclusion. The camera view is adjustable, and after you name the station, you'll have the latest view from your location within 5 minutes. You can access the latest weather observation via the app anytime you want to know what's happening. The display shows the latest image from the camera, as well as weather data elements like temperature and humidity. You can also see other Bloom Sky observations via a map in the app. Clicking on any of the icons showing temperature will give you the latest image from that location along with weather data. The unit was easy to set up and quickly ready to start viewing the weather. The toughest job was finding a suitable location for the unit. My heavily wooded lot presented some issues, but I finally found a spot that gave me a pretty good view of the sky. I was surprised at the end of the day to receive a message from the observational unit notifying me of the daily time lapse. Yep, that's right. At the end of each daylight period, the unit provides you with a time lapse of the weather throughout the daylight hours. This is certainly a very different way to look back at your weather. The emphasis is definitely on seeing your weather. You get temperature and humidity measurements, but there's no measurement of wind or precipitation amounts. Overall, this is a well-constructed unit that is easy to set up and provides a visual diary of the weather at your location. Right now, there's even a holiday sale going on that brings the price down to $186 from the usual $337. The visual nature of this station makes it a good start if you have never had weather equipment before, or an excellent addition if you have a weather station that provides all the numbers. Special thanks to Bloom Sky for providing the unit for evaluation. Got a question about the weather? You can drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
It turns out the second time was the charm for Japan's Akatsuki mission, which entered orbit around Venus earlier today. Akatsuki, which means dawn, was launched back in May of 2010 to study the atmosphere of Venus, as well as look for lightning around the planet. Its planned 7-month trip has turned into a 5-year-long journey around the Sun after the planned orbit insertion failed. 5 years ago today, the spacecraft fired its main engines as planned for a 12-minute burn to enter Venetian orbit, but that burn only lasted about 3 minutes due to salt deposits which had built up and jammed a valve, causing the engine to overheat and ultimately destroying it. A similar problem doomed the Mars Observer probe back in 1993. During that 5-year trip around the Sun, the team developed a daring plan to use the reaction control system to slow the spacecraft instead. These smaller engines are normally only used for finer attitude adjustments, but they're pushing the RCS beyond its design limitations, and it worked. Earlier this morning, the spacecraft fired those 4 RCS thrusters simultaneously for about 20 minutes. It slowed sufficiently to be captured by Venus's gravity, but in a highly elliptical orbit. Mission controls will spend the next several days verifying how useful that orbit will be for science operations. Instead of an orbital period of about 30 hours, Akatsuki will complete an orbit about every 9 days. Early indications, though, are that they should be able to accomplish most of their science goals, but data will take longer to accumulate. The mission will study Venus's atmosphere with its 5 cameras covering from infrared to ultraviolet. Studies of the structures of high-altitude clouds and the heat they emit is planned in infrared. An ultraviolet imager will measure the distribution of atmospheric gases such as sulfur dioxide. Another camera will peer through the clouds in 1-micron wide wavelengths to study heat emitted by the planet's surface. They'll also be looking for any active volcanoes that might exist. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We are doing the show on Monday, December 7th, 2015. The weather pretty quiet around the nation. The east is looking relatively warm for the next few weeks. The west kind of cold and snowy in the mountains. Maybe a severe weather outbreak. It's interesting, Brian, you chime in on this. You've probably seen some of the data. Looks like the European tries to bring a fairly robust system in here late this weekend. Dew points in the upper 60s Sunday where we are. And you got a trough that's trying to go negative tilt. I get the idea it's going to be a late Sunday night squall line, which those are not my favorite. And Brian, you're muted, by the way. Brian has got the little mute button on there.
There he is.
Yep. Hello.
Okay, yes, and you know, James, we haven't had any.
Have
you tried turning it off and on again? Off and on again. Off and on again.
Yes, good. Now go.
We haven't had any severe weather this secondary severe weather season, so it's kind of like it's overdue.
Right, and again, there's not really good agreement at this point, but that might be the next kind of headline weather event, at least for folks in the Dixie Alley, and this is the core of the fall tornado season here. But it sure looks like the East is going to kind of have a green Christmas, John, don't you think, this year?
Man, it's sure looking that way, James. Real quick, I was just looking at the snow coverage across the lower 48. We're at 18.9% for the lower 48. Curiously enough, at this point last year, the lower 48 was covered 20% by snow. So there's not much difference there. But if you look at Canada, that's where the difference is. There was a huge snowpack over Canada 1 year ago. It's not there.
Yeah. I saw some photographs from Wisconsin today, comparing today with last year on December 7th. And, you know, they were just snow-covered, and it was frigid, and everything looks just kind of green and lush there. So, but, you know, we're in this El Nino winter, and I think it's going to throw some surprises. But traditionally, where we are down here, it's kind of mild and wet and stormy and I have some concern about the tornado season. But let me tell you what we're going to do here. Due to timing, I've got to go do some television. I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to the foghorn, and then we're going to do email with Aubrey, and then we're going to do picks of the week, and I'll let somebody pick up the hosting after the email segment. So let's start with Skydaver and the Fog Bank.
Initiating startup sequence.
Hello, WeatherBrains listeners. This is Dave Phillips. My first pick comes from the Capital Weather Gang about an innovative forecast for this winter. The forecaster in question is talking for a very snowy winter in the Mid-Atlantic. NOAA Weather Partners has a video of highlights from the 2015 National Weather Festival. I've got a great fireball photo from Astronomy Picture of the Day. Earth Science Picture of the Day had a great picture of multiple lightning strikes in Utah. And I'll close out with an intense aurora photo from spaceweather.com. Thanks for listening. Skydaver out.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right. First letter is from Terry Domorisi. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I took a trip down memory lane for WeatherBrains and listened to some archive shows. JB mentioned a song, Who Stole My Underwear, and shared some of the lyrics. Even though James wasn't able to find it, he was episode 149 and sent us that link. So thank you for sending us that memory. I got... I don't know if this is on my end or what, but I got 2 listener survey responses from Joanne Stonebaugh, but they both showed up blank. So I don't know if that's an issue with my email or not, because I've kind of had that happen lately, so that could be on my end. Marcus Toops sent in a link. It's really interesting if we can put that on the website, Brian. It's a Facebook. It's called the Balance of Life Team Videos. And it's about some of the cold Canadian winters and how you just are longing for that one day with a temperature above freezing. And of course, in Canada, a temperature above freezing is 1 degree. So it's a really funny video. And let's see. We got another survey response from Michael Hansen from Montana. So again, thank you very much for filling those out. And we appreciate your emails, your guest suggestions. Of course, that brought our guest to us today. And we'd love to hear what you think about the show, what you like, what you don't like, or some topics that you are interested in. So send us an email at weatherbrains.com, email at weatherbrains.com. And don't forget, you can find us on the Facebook and the Twitter. Just search for WeatherBrains, or you can find us all individually.
Great roundup there, Aubrey. Way to go. The emails are a lot of fun to read, so we really encourage that. And also, let's make a point of mentioning skywritings. If you're not signed up to receive our newsletter, please do so. Brian's doing a great job with that. We still have some states that aren't represented, right, Brian?
Yes, we still have 5 states that are not represented. So, got to get some people there from Delaware and Alaska and wherever.
Okay, good. I know mine's in it. We're represented in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, you're represented.
Good.
You're just not in the top 10.
Gotta do some marketing, John.
Yeah, John.
Way to go, Mr. Sottle there. Thank you.
I've been giving John a hard time about that. He's just not getting out there and doing the marketing up in Pennsylvania that he needs to do. Those 5 states are Alaska, Delaware, Hawaii, North Dakota, and Rhode Island. So we'd love to get a subscriber from each one of those.
Shouldn't be hard. You got the smallest states in there, just a couple people.
Yep. I think most of the states would fit in Alaska.
Right. Well, you can hear all my clocks going off. It's 11 o'clock Eastern time right now. Well, Jim, did anybody mention to you picks of the week? You know what that is?
No.
Ah, okay. Well, what we do is we go around the table and we ask for a pick of the week. And this is a topic of interest, a website, a link that you'd like to make available. We've put these on our webpage so that viewers and listeners can go to our webpage and click on that link and see what we're talking about. So, tell you what, you can think about it. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
Aubrey, pick of the week from you, please.
Yes, mine is about the end of hurricane season, and I can't even remember who the link is from, but it also shows this nice graphic about the global hurricane tracks. We've all seen the hurricane track from, like, 1950 to 2010 or whatever, the big graphic of all the lines. This is the graphic similar that's from this season globally, and it does a nice little summary of the hurricane season and lack thereof in the United States.
Yeah, this was a great pick. I was actually looking at it myself this afternoon. Let me see if I can pick that up real quick.
I can't remember who. And my mouse, I think there's some issue with Google Hangout. My mouse likes to die every time I have Google Hangouts up, so it's hard for me to flip back and forth between things.
Okay. Well, let's see if I'm showing it now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put the tracks in there plus the category, which was really great. So you can look at the global distribution of tropical cyclones this season. Excellent. I think we've lost Kevin, haven't we? Okay. Let me come back out. Stop.
He's probably doing weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a job to do.
Something like that.
Okay, Brian, pick of the week from you.
Well, one of the sites I go to fairly frequently is prepared by the National Weather Service, and it's their regional radar composites. And it's kind of nice to not be limited to just a single radar. So these are for different regions of the country, and I find them a nice, useful service, so I'll put that link up there.
Okay, thanks. Jim, I'll give you another chance here. I'll go next and give you a minute to think about it. My pick of the week is actually an article that was suggested by a viewer. This is Jonathan Thompson's suggestion, and the article appeared a week or two ago. It's entitled "Meet the Midwestern Pilots Who Risk Their Lives to Change the Weather." It's about cloud seeding, and I'm going to share this with you right now. The reason why this caught my eye is because this article deals with some of the folks that I worked with when I was in the field in North Dakota in 1993. And the picture that's on the page right now is with a pilot by the name of Hans Allness, who was the pilot that I flew as a research scientist with on that plane. And standing next to him is Bruce Bowe, who is the VP for Meteorology for Weather Modification Incorporated out of Fargo, North Dakota. I've known Bruce for more than 20 years. After I saw this article, I asked him, do you want to be on WeatherBrains? And he's all for it. So I just need to get with Bill, and we'll schedule Bruce. He is a great guy.
Great.
Yeah, he's former director of the Atmospheric Resource Board in North Dakota. He will be a great guest. Okay, Jim, pick of the week if you got one.
Well, I do, but it's it has to do with the South Carolina flood. I wrote a blog post. Actually, I wrote an article for our TV station, and you can either access it through our TV station, or you can go to Weather Shift because they republished it as a blog post on the community blog, and it talks about the South Carolina flood and how rare it was for us. You know, back when the flood was occurring, this was early October, people were throwing around, you know, this is a 1,000-year flood. And I kept asking, how do they know that? And so I called the people at Climate Central. They said, you know, could you write something about the flood? And of course, at the time, I was knee-deep in water, so I really didn't have time. And then it dawned on me, why are these people calling this a 1,000-year flood? And no one could tell me how they calculated that, how they got that figure. So I said, you know, you've got some people that are pretty smart in the statistical realm on staff. Do you think your people could run the numbers and give me, you know, some indication of what the return risk is of an event like this? Keep in mind that this rain event that we had in early October, it broke 1 day, 2 day, and 3 day rainfalls. So it was historic by any measure. But was it a 1,000-year flood? I don't know. So they ran the calculations, and when they got back to me, first of all, they gave me the figures for Charleston and for Columbia. In Charleston, the 3 day rain event was a 1 in 800-year event. But for Columbia, it was a 1 in 9,000-year event.
Wow.
Now, this is just from the rainfall. Now, keep in mind, you can look at this from two different ways. You can look at it from rainfall, or you can look at it from stream flow gauges.
Right.
The interesting thing about the stream flow gauges, and the USGS pointed this out, there were only 3 gauges that broke records. And those 3 were the only ones that were above their mark for a 500-year flood. Well, so I dug a little bit deeper. And as it turns out, one of the reasons why the flood, even though it was bad, was not as bad as it could have been is because of the dams. I got together with I shared this material with the State Emergency Management Division. And what they told me was this. Look, there were 36 dams that failed in this flood. There were 167 dams that were damaged and will have to be repaired. Now, here's the staggering number. There are 34 dams in South Carolina that are regulated by the federal government. There are almost 2,400 dams that are regulated by DHEC, the Department of Health and Environmental Control. But there are approximately 10,000 dams in South Carolina. So 76% of the dams in South Carolina are on private property, and they are not regulated. And so there is an issue that needs to be dealt with. I jokingly, you hear Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes. South Carolina is the land of 10,000 dams. And so I wrote this piece, and it's on Weather Shift in their community blog. I blog for them, and the piece is a 1 in 9,000 year event. It was truly an amazing event. We're still going through the data. There was so much of it. It was made worse in Columbia because of the cascading failure of 3 dams. And even our TV station flooded. But it wasn't because we were in the flood. It was because of something that happened on the property behind us. And there was a pond that no one knew about, and it overflowed and went right into our TV station. So while we're on the air trying to give people information about this flood, we're on the 2nd floor. That's where all the broadcast operations. On the 1st floor, the entire TV station is 3 inches of water.
I wanted there to be some time tonight for you to expound on this, because this is a great story. We'd like to have heard. We'll have to get you back on and talk about this some more.
It was truly amazing because I was on the conference calls to our corporate headquarters 4 days before the event. And the focus 4 days before the event was certainly different from what happened right before the flood.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it just changed. But there were some amazing things that happened with the computer models which allowed us to focus. We knew what was coming. We knew it was going to be bad. We knew it was going to be historic. We knew that there were going to be dams that were going to fail. We knew all of this. But it doesn't prepare you ultimately for the reality of what happened, because there's no way to know which dam is going to fail, who is going to get flooded, but we were at least prepared for the event.
It was a success, too. For the QPF forecast success by the National Weather Service. A lot of attention was given to Joaquin and where that was going to go, but the forecast precipitation where you are was a success.
It was. But here's the amazing thing. Wednesday night, the National Hurricane Center said, we're going to fly the high-altitude aircraft out there at Joaquin and take measurements of the upper atmosphere. And every time they do that, it provides the model with more information than the model would have had. And I told our people that night, I said, look, I know what went on with the conference call. I know everybody's focused on the Mid-Atlantic states, but I'm telling you right now, this is not the final word. When the planes get out there and they take the data and that data gets into the computer models, don't be surprised if tomorrow it's a totally different ballgame. And sure enough, the next day, it's a totally different ballgame. But the amazing thing was that the computer models remained consistent. Even though the hurricane was not going to hit us, it was consistent. We were going to get heavy rain before the hurricane. We got heavy rain after the forecast model said we weren't going to get the hurricane. That told me that there was something bigger at play. And it didn't take long to figure it out. And once we knew what was going on, it was an easy forecast.
I agree. Excellent. Well, Jim, it's been a pleasure to have you on this evening. It's just Brian and I left.
I thank you.
Appreciate it, Jim.
Yeah, we'll have to get you back on and talk about this. Like you were saying, this is a far-reaching impact, and it will be around for a while.
Yeah, I've already had requests to do talks at some of the conferences, so we're preparing the graphics now.
Great. Well, make sure you send us a link, okay? We'll put that on our website.
I certainly will.
Excellent. And for those that are listening and viewing, of course, this has been WeatherBrains. We come to you every Monday evening, 9:30 Eastern Time, 8:30 Central. And there's just Brian and I left, along with Jim Gandy. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate
You're
it, Jim.
welcome.
We wish you a great evening. Take care.
Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
That's right.
I intend to.
So long, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
WeatherBrains corporate headquarters. The show is running late tonight. We had a good show with Jim Gandy of Columbia, South Carolina. And these guys might still be on the air, so I've got to be very quiet here. See if they're still on the air. No, they're not on the air. They're gone. So this is that awkward time where I'm on WeatherBrains and I'm on Periscope at the same time. Hello. So WeatherBrains, thank you. Jim Gandy was a great guest. Enjoyed having him. We'll see you guys next Monday night. You'll have a great week. Join us over on Periscope if you want to carry this or keep this going. Goodbye.